Here is a slide up there, and the classicists among us, of which there are quite a few, will appreciate. In fact, there's a paper on this tomorrow that will appreciate the subtitle, How the Mongols Did It on Horseback. And I always wanted to write a pornographic book entitled Doing It on Horseback, but I don't have the imagination for that. And it's my favorite historian, Ammianus Marcellinus, who was pro-Julian, the apostate, and I always liked Julian. Lately, I have been working non-stop, as it were, because it's part of a proposal on the Silk Roads. And I never particularly focused things on the Silk Roads, but in the past, but I worked with a lady who not only is interested in the land, Angela Schottenheimer, of the University of Salzburg, who is not only interested in the Silk Road, the land Silk Road, but also very much so, the maritime Silk Roads. She's very much into, she has a pet archaeologist, maritime archaeologist, Kimura-san, and we sort of got together and grooved, as I used to say, and we expanded each other's intellectual horizon. So the current presentation is, a lot of it's my older material, but it grows out of this Silk Roads thing. And why are the Silk Roads important? Because, and I just wrote a book with Gene Anderson called Crossroads of Cuisine, which looks at food in Central Asia and the interaction. They're important because basically you have two base zones, Iranian in the Iranian world, and to a certain extent the Arabic world, but particularly the Iranian world. I'm not right to understate the importance of Iran and Persian culture, and the other in China. And let's see, I'm supposed to do this. Yes! I'm so glad when these things work. That's China, Han Dynasty China. But there were two ends to the Silk Road. Doesn't mean that people outside of this, like India, for example, couldn't have their own connections with the Silk Road. But the main connections were in China and in the West, which we'll have in a minute. Now here's Han Dynasty China. I think it is Western Han. Yeah, this is when the Chinese first got into contact with Central Asia. And you know, China is agricultural in the north. They have wheat and millet. In the south, they have rice. And they're very different, but it blends as you go into that little loop of land. It blends out into Central Asia. And there are all these oases. And there's nothing more different in the world than an intensive agricultural oasis in Central Asia, which is some of the most productive agriculture in the world. I mean, it's incredibly, on a fourth of an acre, they'll grow enough to feed all kinds of people. And but what China was doing, which is even rice, was extensive compared to that. And so it goes and it collides. And then on the other side, and then two of the cities, there's Chang'an on here, and up here is Dunhuang. And Dunhuang is the place where it has all the caves and things like it. But those were two ends of the Silk Road. There were so many foreigners in Chang'an and the Tang Dynasty that there was a Sogdian sector. There were all these, they had inscriptions, they had tombs, they were Sogdian food, the little dance that people were doing and the women shake their hands and stuff, which is taken up into Chinese. They do it very slowly. And even in Japan, it gets there from Tang Dynasty China. But originally it was a Central Asian dance. There were Central Asian orchestras traveling all over the place. So Chang'an is a pretty interesting place. It's Xi'an today, so if you know China. And the Central Asia. Now, look, I managed to find maps that leave out the middle. and this is, Central Asia is oases, it is river valleys. The river valleys are quite intensely cultivated, although now there are problems and things like that. But the important thing is there's a desert in between. And it means you have to figure out a way to get across the desert. And if you move things across, it has to work in some way. Like the Buddhists used to move relics and things like that, and they move silk back and things like that. So it's a very complicated exchange that goes on. But it most certainly, and Valerie Hanson's book is now, she has a new volume, new edition of her book. But she doesn't, I don't think she sees the economics, doesn't see the way it works. And in the Silk Roads, I like smoking guns. That's an American term. It means that Nixon was in trouble and we had to find the smoking gun that would condemn. Now he's nothing compared to what goes on these days. But I realized he was like 1% of some of the stuff. But I like smoking guns. Illustrate what I mean, there's a word in Mongolian, sagat. It means a share of the booty. And it has to do with the way the society was structured and that everybody was supposed to get a share of the booty. And it exists in Chinese as xiaohua. It's a loan word. And then I found out it exists in medieval Portuguese. Portuguese weren't even part of the Mongol Empire. And this is before the age of exploration. What were they doing in the 1300s and 1400s? And the Portuguese were one of the first people to start using porcelain. By the way, it gets into Bulgaria about 1330. And somewhere I postulate had to do with a soupy cuisine. And also, another thing that you look for beside the exchange of words is people. Project for the Silk Roads project, the bigger one, will be on Arabic medicine in China and Chinese medicine in the Persian and Arabic-speaking world. There's this encyclopedia of Chinese medicine that was written under Rashid al-Din in Iran. It has a translation of a Pulse classic and Yellow Emperor's classic fragments and stuff like that. Of course, tea duty gets in. But in China, we have a work called the Huigui Yaofang, and it means the Muslim medicinal recipes. And the Huigui Yaofang is, we have 400 dense manuscript pages surviving. Originally it was 35, it was more like 500. And originally it was 3,500 pages. And it was a hospital encyclopedia. And I've translated the whole thing. And I mean, the parts that survive. And we have part of it is a table of content. But they obviously, I mean, they quote Galen, they have Arabic script entries. The Arabic script entries are transliterated into Chinese, and the Chinese was obviously read by an Uyghur. I mean, it's highly palatalized, and there's a Japanese scholar that said exactly the same thing about this Tansuk, this encyclopedia of Chinese medicine. The Uyghurs were involved in that too. So that's a smoking gun. But there's more, in this case, there's an even bigger smoking gun, and that is that we know one individual who apparently carried all this stuff. And his name was Isa the Translator. This is Rashid al-Din's term. Isa Jesus. He was a Christian. And not that you had to be a Christian to have that name during this period, but Isa was a Syrian, and he was born in Syria, and he showed up at Guya Khan's court. This was in the 1240s. As a young man, came from a medical family, and hung on among the Mongols, and ended up in Kublai Khan's China. And Kublai Khan had a connection with, well, it's down here, Iran, because there was a friendly dynasty in Iran. And so he sent Isa and Buell, who was a general, back to Mongol Iran, and on an embassy. And so Isa went back to Iran, and then he made it back. He came back to China. He didn't die until like 1308. Amazing guy. And his family were Arab medicine doctors, and they were responsible for creating various institutions of Arabic medicine in China. And these were taken over by the UN government, who had a charitable medicine Arabic clinic for the commoners and stuff like that. So we think he brought back the Yinshan Zhongyao, not the Yinshan Zhongyao, the Huigui Yaofang, the original text of it. The original, it pops up, and we think it's 14th century in its original form, but the current edition has a reference in it. During the Hongwu period, there was a man of Beiping. Okay, Hongwu period ends in 1398. Beiping ceased to be Beiping in the early part of the 1400s. So therefore, we know this was written between 1398 and 1408. And then somebody has put all these substitutions into it for medicinals. And a lot of them are disasters. If you use the substitutions, you will die. But it shows that it comes from a period when the Ming Dynasty had lost its Indian Ocean connections. Ming Dynasty, well, I won't say nasty things about the Ming Dynasty, but it's a very ingrown dynasty. It starts out with the Zhenghe voyages and going all over the Indian Ocean, and then it ends up with turned inward and so forth. So Mongols, strictly speaking, were not a Silk Road culture. They're up in Central Asia. They're nomadizing around, but nonetheless, the Mongols I've always characterized as let's make a deal. They love to put together larger social units. In contrary to the image you have of Genghis Khan comes in and kills everybody, he might have killed a few people. In fact, he killed more than a few. But he also mostly carried people off. They relocated populations, established new cities. Russia, South Russia, suddenly has all these cities with indoor plumbing and central heating and things like that the Mongols created. They take people from Central Asia and they put them there. And so they took advantage of the trade of these things that went through the Silk Roads. And so it didn't bother them in the slightest that they didn't invent the system. They were willing to do it. But what we're interested in today is that the Mongols were tremendously influential in terms of food and food waste because they were the most powerful culture in the world and in their time, and what they ate was influential. Well, mostly you might think they were sitting around with boiled mutton and things like that, and that didn't influence people very much. But in fact, they improved on their food, as we'll see, and then also, as I get to the end here, the Mongols are apparently responsible for creating mobile skills and essentially introducing the world, not just China or Iran or not Iran, but India, to distilled liquor. The word for araki is the Mongol era word for distilled liquor, and it still exists in Turkey, for example, and powerful stuff. And it's interesting, the earliest reference, which we'll get to in a minute, to araki, this distilled liquor, is araj, which is a Uyghur form. There's this Uyghurs again. They're everywhere. My little Kazakh Koligan, she's young, she's 27, so I think of her as little, and she says that the Mongols conquered the world on horseback and then relied on us Turks to rule the world for you. There's a little bit of nationalism hooked up in that, but there's more truth than anything else. Okay, what do we know about Mongol food waste when they start out? This is a quotation which you can read if you're quick. The Secret History has a passage. Secret History is the Mongol native chronicle. It's in Mongolian. It was originally transliterated to the Chinese and reconstructed, and now we have practically complete Uyghur script Mongol version. But the Secret History tells the rise of Genghis Khan. There's a chronicle of Ögedei, the next ruler, hooked onto it. And it essentially is the most important source. It tells you what the Mongol internal point of view. And Genghis Khan's father, Yesugei, was murdered by the Tatars. Tatars are always the bad guy, and then if you read the Secret History, they wipe them out. Except they didn't. They're Tatars all over the bloody place. And don't believe the stories that you read. But anyway, the awful thing that happened to Temujin, the later Genghis Khan, is that he and his mother and his brothers were abandoned on the pastures. They were essentially left to starve. And this is a famous passage that describes how Holeneka, or Holen Ujin is Chinese word, Furen, and how she did her thing, ran around collecting wild apples and bird cherries and nourished their throats. And this is this is all in, these sections are in poetry. And it's the initial alliteration of an initial letter and then internal alliteration inside. And nothing important in the Secret History is said without going into poetry. So anyway, so she's the one that saved them, and all there's references to, they were fishing with hooks for Jebuga and Kara and so on. And it makes it seem like that this is the most awful thing in the world. Imagine you can't eat sheep, you've got to eat berries, you've got to eat wild onions, garlic chives, all this sort of stuff, and fish. But in fact, we know that the Mongols ate a lot of fish. It wasn't anything new. And the Mongols persisted with this kind of diet. Again, you believe that this is what they actually ate. They had to eat this stuff. The animals would frequently die, and things like that. And this was the basic Mongol food. And of course, the main thing they ate was garlic. I mean, the main thing they ate was mutton. But they couldn't afford to eat meat all the time, so they would use the cheese and the milk. And the great prestige food is fermented mare's milk. Although you can make some wonderful fermented cow's milk that you can distill. And I've had cow's milk brandy. It was whatever. And anyway, I and my photographer got drunk on. Started out with horse mare's milk brandy, and then we ate drank cow's milk brandy. But as times went on, the Mongols did things like they got farmers and they put them in the steppe and they built a city and they raised millet. And so Chinggis Khan at one point is given some grape wine and he says, oh, it has a delicate flavor, but it pleases the inner man. And things like this. So different foods came in and they had to change their foods. And one of the reasons we know what the foods, how they continue to be loyal to their older foods is the fact that there's a report called the Shui Yunji, which is Record of Transportation by Water. The Sung Royal Court was captured in 1276, and they were brought to Kublai's capital. And Chabui Hatun, Mrs. Kublai, made sure that they were treated well. And he, by the way, he was a wife's boy. And the only reason she didn't bully him more is because she died relatively early. But Chabui is very important. And she made sure that the Sung Dynasty court was treated well. But they were nonetheless, we have a record of what they ate. And the first thing out of the door was kummas with some kind of vegetable. The Chinese say green onions, almost certainly not green onion. And I've been told by a Mongol, oh, I don't eat green onions with kummas. And so I should talk to the Mongol. But we know that they serve them kummas. And the Sung people were going, oh my God. And then they also had some chicken dishes that were Chinese. And so and then some other things, some noodle dishes. So there's already, by 1276, there's a good deal of changing foodways going on. And they did two things at this point. They adapted, they improved their existing foodways, and they adapted their existing foodways to a larger world, the Silk Road world, with Iranian food and things like that. And we have a source called the Yinjiang Zhongyao, proper and essential things for the emperor's food and drink. And this is the subject of the soup for the Han. And it's an official dietary presented at the court in 1330. And the cooks were apparently, and I was listening earlier today, and I suddenly realized it's more Western than even I thought. And the cooks were probably Turks. The main person in charge, a man named Hussein, was Durakovic used to like to read his name as Koski, a Mongolian or Turkic name in this case. I think it's a Chinese name, but I think he was a Turk. And we know there were Tibetans involved in making this dietary. We have a wonderful Tibetan source, the Red Annals. And the Red Annals said when the Lama Pakpa went to Kublai's court, he was the one that converted the Mongols to Buddhism with a little help from Chabui. When he went to court, he took with him a choral circle of people that the Khan would like, and experts. And one of the people he took was a man named Damba Dorje, and who incidentally has a long biography in Chinese. And Damba Dorje brought with him some Biji doctors. Biji is a Tibetan word to indicate practitioners of Persian medicine, Galenic medicine. And they said one of these Biji doctors ended up as the head of dietary practice in Mongol China. So we know that first, before Hussein Wei, this Tibetan was running things. Anyway, so what happened is we have these 95 recipes of exotic flavors, and these are almost certainly the court preferred recipes. There's a lot of other things in the Yechang Zhongyao. There's how to choose and what nurse, food interactions, which is today I realize was Ibn Sina, and there's also medicinal recipes. They have a section on drinks. Sharabat is one of the words that's an Arabic word, and they have, again, hard liquors are referred to. And but the first thing they did was to try the cooks adapt their existing foods. And this is an example: roast wolf soup. And all of the recipes in this book have, they try to figure out what the medicinal properties of this food are. And then it says, it's beautiful. It says, ancient Bunsao herbals do not include entries on wolf meat. At present, we state that its nature is heating. It treats asthenia. I have never heard that it is poisonous for those eating it. In the case of the present recipe, we use spices to help its flavor. It warms the 5 internal organs and warms the center. The center is the medium aspect, the balance, good glycemic. And basically, this is a lamb recipe. You catch a wolf, and you don't do it directly. You have to go through this ritual. You don't want to kill the wolf. That's bad. But you put a rope around its neck and gallop and let it strangle itself. But you don't go out hunting wolf. Or you get your eagle to do it. And they basically took it, and you boil it up, and you notice it's all called cardamoms. Actually, it just means big cardamoms. And this is the basic thing: is a broth, and we know the Mongols love broth, and a spice, a signature spice, and then some other things: black pepper, kosni. Here is asafoetida by its Iranian name, and long pepper, grain of paradise, small cardamoms. And underline, they're foreign words in the text, and then you adjust the flavors and things like that. But anyway, this is typical. There are 95 of these recipes. Not all of them, only 27 of them start out as a soup. Some of them are other kinds of recipes like noodles. And the Yechang Zhongyao also, in good Arabic medicine fashion, had a listing. The 3rd chapter is a listing of all of the foods that go into things and their dietary properties. And here's, I think that these illustrations are incredibly important because I think they move back and forth. We know the Tan Suk, the Encyclopedia of Chinese Medicine in Iran, we know that a lot of the illustrations were taken from Chinese sources. I mean, there's a picture of the yellow emperor and all this kind of stuff. And they had to get these from somewhere. So there is a tradition the Chinese have of illustrating materia medica, but it goes over the deep end during this period. The Chinese, a lot of these animal meats first appear in this source and are taken up in mainstream China. I just thought you would enjoy seeing what they look like. And you have the names here. This is what it's Surachila. It's the name of the thing in transcription. Alachun, which is the variegated swan. There was the Yikashiragun and the Alachun, the variegated swan, and then we have one that we can't identify. And and then this is the description. Its flavor, its properties, it is a tonic for the median aspect and things like that. And so these are Mongol hunting animals. I mean, the Chinese weren't eating Cygnus alor. And I've seen some in Berlin since I've been here, so I'm in Berlin, in London. So the Chinese were not eating these, but the Mongols certainly were. And then here is the Tarpakan, Talabuwa, and this is a type of marmot. And these are nasty marmots in recent times because they're a vector of Black Death. And there's a reference in the source that says that the Northerners dig them out of the ground and eat them, and boil them up and eat them. Which means that in this period, in the 14th century, you could do that. If you do that today, you die of a Black Death, because unless you're very, very careful. So we have a lot of information. And then we have some pretty assimilated stuff that comes through. Here's one of my favorite recipes. Believe it or not, this is the oldest curry recipe in the world. It's pre-chili, but it's quite hot, it's quite tasty, and you notice the same thing. You start out with mutton, and you have a large cod, and then you have chickpeas, and then you pulverize and remove the skins. That's Middle Eastern, that's straight Arab. Only the Arabs remove the skins of the chickpeas. And you have all these things that has a Turkish term or coin shape. You have zafaran again, kasni, asafetida. This, if you cook this up, and then you have to buy soup for them, get the rest of the recipe, unless you write me. If you cook this up, you come up with something which is quite warm. Things like turmeric and things like that. But the interesting stuff is it's called belbo soup. Belbo is the Tibetan word for Nepal and Kashmir. So clearly they took a Mongol love of boiled mutton and with a large cardamom, and they took some things from Kashmir and Nepal and combined them together. And they made not just roast wolf soup with the spices, but something which was really a culinary delight. It was a combination of things. Not only did they, during this period, do they create these combined flavor recipes, but this is from a popular encyclopedia, the Jujia Biyun Shorle, things that you use when you're dwelling at home. It's a 14th century encyclopedia of popular, well, all kinds of things, but basically food. And it's totally for the Chinese audience. It's not for anybody else but the Chinese. And there are 12 Muslim recipes. And I just included an example of two of them. Çekerdi pirak. Okay, what do we notice here? The Turkish gentleman over there will notice that it's pirak and it's not borak. And pirak is the same word but as it's existed in Central Asia with P. And so this is sweet borla. Çekerdi is with sugar. It's Turkish, straight Turkish. And then they even have a reference that we don't know what Kurşat cakes are. And here's sambusak. We were talking about samosa. Sambusak is just the old Iranian word for samosa. And there's samosas all over the place. Manta and samosas are close to being the international food. Anyway, so this is one of the oldest borak recipes, I don't know. Maybe there's one from Turkey. And I thought you would enjoy this one, goulash. And goulash is, gul is flour. In Turkish Turkey, it's rose, I think, isn't it rose? But in Central Asia, it's just flour, because they don't have roses. And ach is any food that isn't meat, grain food, something like it. But read this recipe carefully. You make these thin dough things, and you pile them up, and you put filling, and then go again and go again. It's a baklava. It's a proto-baklava. This is the earliest recipe for baklava. And now the thing is based on Middle Eastern precedents, and so it wasn't invented overnight. But the point is, this is the first case we know of somebody coming up with something that's a recognizable baklava. So did the Mongols invent baklava? No, but their Turkic cooks did. The Turks again. Anyway, there's 12 of these recipes, and they're quite fascinating. And in our books and in various publications, I have tried to trace all these different foods, and they do spread. There's, for example, a Mogul recipe. The word for these soups are shuben in Mongolian, which is probably a Turkic loanword, and it's all over the place. And there's a Mogul cookbook from the 1500s, which gives you this Mogul recipe. And it's a shuben, and it calls it a shuben. And it's just like this. It's boiled mutton and spices. And they were in Iran. And I postulate somewhere that porcelain, one of the reasons for the interest in porcelain was the fact that it's really good to eat soup in a porcelain bowl. I mean, you don't want to have, porous pottery and things like that. So it was a very soupy cuisine. And we have so many descriptions of court eating and drinking during this period. They had a good time. Okay, because I only have an hour and I have a lot of material. What I'm working on now is distillation. And the Mongols gave the world, it's not that they invented hard liquor, it's not that they invented distillation, but they were very good at using other people's technology. And this is what stills were like before the Mongols. And here you have a boiler, and then the stuff rises, and it collects and goes back down again and runs off. And then you have a condenser, you have cold water at top. And this one, I'm not quite sure, but the spouts seem to be going in the wrong direction. And the trick with distillation, it's not hard to distill things, although you can make some nice poisons, so you don't want to. But you have to create a pressure inside the boiling apparatus, and you have to also resupply the water, because once the water or whatever you're cooling with snow is gone, then the cycle ends. So this one has water at the top, and here's another even more. So this is another one from slightly later period. This one has, boils down here, goes up, collects, and you have to have it porous, and it runs out. And up here, to make sure that you have a supply of water, there's a piston. You can pump water into the top thing, so you can make a lot of booze. And this also has the beneficial effect of maintaining pressure on the what's going on in the distillation. Because I'm told, I work with a Mongol lady named Botbulers, and she tells me it's very important the maintaining the pressure. And there's the Yinshan Zhongyao has many references. I don't remember if I don't include them. But we know that they were drinking this stuff. We know that this Araji liquor brandy is Swedish in flavor and pecan. It is very heating and has great poison. It is good for dispensing chill head accumulation. In other words, you don't feel good, you drink this stuff. It removes cold cheek. Good wine is distilled to procure a dew. This is the Araji. And then you have a surama liquor. Surama today is an Uyghur word, but originally it was a Tibetan word. So you wonder where that came from. And there's apparently a reference to sorghum. Sorghum was spread by the Mongols, it was popularized by them. And this is what Rashid al-Din says, this isn't me. And but you can make wonderful booze from sorghum. I don't recommend it. I always thought it was vile. But I once got drunk under the table drinking sorghum brandy by a Turkish lady, and I figured that any booze that she could take that I can't take, I don't want to mess with. So, the problem is that we have a big gap here. We don't have, for a long time, we don't know we know they had portable stills, and that's not what the Mongols introduced distillation of hard liquor to Korea. Soju is a rice wine, as a rice liquor, but it used to be called alaki, use the Mongol word, and a couple of Korean sources say in no uncertain term, the Mongols introduced this. They were getting ready to invade Japan, and they were making this booze, and we Koreans thought, neat. So soju, of course, is not made with mare's milk. And why did they were so interested in distillation with mare's milk? It's because of the fact that mare's milk won't keep. It is the cultural grade food. And after a while, you run out of it, and if you're Han, you're in bad shape. So what you do is you distill it, and everybody can drink the distilled apparatus and live happily ever after. And but we don't have any actual Mongol stills for quite a while. Peter Paulus, and I've always felt close to Paulus because one night my wife and I were fooling around, and we got locked in the graveyard, and I found Peter Paulus's tombstone. He was a Berliner, and but Peter Paulus went out in the 18th century and traveled all around Central Asia for Catherine the Great and collected all this information and beautiful illustrations. This is a Kalmuk still, and this is atypical. This is a culturally mixed still. And over here is a tripod, and then you have a thing you boil the cow's milk or whatever it is, and they preferred cow's milk. It produced more brandy. And then the pipe that comes out, it looks like the serpentine of a Western style still, but in fact it's made of bark and leather. And it's actually an air-cooled thing. And then it goes down here and there's snow. And I don't understand the apparatus, how they collect the booze. Now this isn't my type of still and what they used anywhere else, but this is a Mongol still. Okay, this is important. This is a wooden still, and it has, just like the Chinese ones, it has a thing down, a place to boil the thing, and it goes up and it catches and condenses, and it runs out, and then you put cold water on the top. And you can, because it's wood, it's very easily movable, and you can keep it in a yurt. So this is probably the type of still. And the Mongol, that was widely used among the Mongols. And there's two varieties. There's this variety where it goes off the side, and there's another variety where it has a little bucket-like thing inside the still. And this collects the material. And Joseph Needham calls that type of still the Mongol type of still, and he calls this one an East Asian type of still. But both of them are to be associated with the Mongols. And why they're so interesting is because they spread to the New World. The Manila Galleon, it got to the Philippine Islands, these type of stills, and Icelandic bootleggers use them. And the sailors used to go across on the Manila Galleon, and they would jump ship in Acapulco, and pretty soon they were teaching the Indians how to make pulque using one of these stills. And now the tequila, it uses these big industrial stills with metal and serpentines, things like that. But pulque, the Indian style, pre-tequila, is made with these kind of stills. And it's interesting that here's a young lady from Mexico, and here, look, doesn't that look like just exactly the same kind of still? It works the same way, except that it has this spoon-like apparatus. You put this in there. This feeds water, and the stuff collects in this and runs off. But even the ones with the little buckets are found in Mexico. But these type of stills are all over the place. So what we think happened is the fact that the Mongols, they like to drink. They encourage other people to drink. You didn't have to use mare's milk. You could use rice wine and things like that. And so here, this is tequila's made out of cactus. But so the cactus and so forth, and I've had pulque. It's quite good. You have to. It's because the Mexican government, the federales, they don't like the locals making their own booze. As in the United States, we know it's called bootleg moonshine, and so they try to stamp them out. But of course, if all your still is this piece of wood, it's very easy to do. So I and my photographer Monserrat de Pablo of the University of de la Mancha in Spain, I started a few years ago working with a practicing artist photographer with a wonderful sense of vision and things like that. It's the best decision I ever made. Not only is she easy to get along with, but she's a wonderful photographer. I don't take her, even if she was not easy to get along with, I'd still want to work with her. But she's a nice person to travel with. And we've taken 4,000 pictures, starting out in Istanbul, Alma-Ata, Mongolia, and we went to Seattle, where I live, because we had to write a book, finish a book. And anyway, she was in Mongolia with me, and we got to see, this is the type of still this is made out of metal in this case, with the bucket inside. And this is, I just give you this one picture, but she took the whole series of, actually, this Mongol comes out of his yurt, and he says, by the way, we're going to distill some cow's milk. Would you like to watch? Is the sky blue? Is it bear Catholic? Does it girl poop in the woods? So we went in, and she was able to get like 17 pictures of the entire process. You start out with a big bag, and you put the cow's milk in there, and everybody that enters the yurt has to shake the bag to keep the fermentation going. And when it gets to be a certain stage, they boil it and then they collect it. And I assure you that in the paper, the last picture is our host presenting us with the fermented cow's milk. And it's really quite good. It sounds like, oh my God, awful. But milk brandy is good stuff. And so finally, I didn't want to go on it. And some of you will know where that quote is from. That's Mel Blanc, of course. And so I'm still working on this, and we had a conference in Salzburg, Austria, 2015, and where we got people together working on distillation, cheese making, and things like that, some Mongols, Kazakh, and did all this. We're going to have another conference, if I can find some more funding, in Mongolia in this year. No, next year. And I tried to work in doing this distillation stuff. I've worked not only with the people making it, but I worked, my friend Batdorj is a biologist, and she works on the health benefits for distilled araki. There are quite a few. There are anti-tuberculosis, things like that, and so I try to put together as many people as possible. And I need to mention here, because she's so important, that we had an article out with Ana Valenzuela Zapata is the first author, and called Huichol Stills, A Century of Anthropology, Technology Transfer Innovation. It's in Crossroads, which is a online journal, so it's available. And Anna was the one who got me interested in all of this crazy distillation stuff. And I in turn got a Korean colleague, Park Hyun-hee, interested in it. Now she's writing a book on soju and things like that. And of course, I like studying distilled liquor because you can drink the results of it. So that's all. Okay, I hope I didn't go too far over.
No, how are we doing?
So let's have lots of questions. Yes, sir.
You have, first of all, thank you. That was absolutely wonderful. You have quite properly spent a lot of time on distillation. Bertrand Russell, in his Nobel Prize acceptance speech in 1950, which is full of wisdom, said, "When we in the West sent our representatives into primitive societies all over the world, taking with them all the blessings of civilization from the gift of the gospel to apple pie, the thing that was most prized by the natives was the discovery of alcoholic beverages, because," he said, "it gave them for the first time in their lives the brief illusion that it was better to be alive than dead."
Europeans think they invented the wheel. And we were talking earlier about the Turks thinking they invented the wheel. The Turks have more justification because they were around and they were important. But no, they didn't invent distillation. Distillation was invented multiple times. We have all these strange pots from the New World indicating an independent invention. It was almost certainly independently invented in India. The Chinese invented distillation, and the Egyptians, the Hellenistic Egyptians, invented it. They used glass, and then they had these serpentines to cool the glass. And why they would think that probably if the Brits thought they were bringing civilization and hard liquor to the natives, they're probably Muslims. Because the Indians certainly knew about it.
Well, they certainly didn't invent it, but they did take it to places that hadn't had it before. That's not true.
But
Who had the question there?
I'm
Mike?
just saying, I mean, it's not true that taking sort of alcohol to the natives as if they didn't know what it was.
well, no, I mean alcohol isn't civilization in and of yourself. It's part of the feasting culture, and the feasting culture is extremely important. And the Mongols, yeah, they like to drink, but they also like to feast. And this was part of their social ritual. And so I'm not saying that booze was civilization and ye Native Americans, if you don't drink, you're something else again. But people wanted to drink it. Can you imagine, let's use a better example. Can you imagine Korea without soju? I mean, really, you can't. That's the national drink. And it's part of their social ritual again. So I don't drink hard liquor myself very much, but I can understand why people would want to. And I must admit, I did buy some soju on sale and enjoyed it thoroughly. So it's alcohol, social ritual, that's part of civilization too. I think so. Yeah.
Yes, drinking is.
Maybe not the best example, and certainly taking the Native Americans, actually if we really, the Pulque culture got to the Native Americans before the gringos came in with their thing. So the people like it. They live hard lives and they wanted to drink something.
I mean, I was just gonna, I don't know what you were saying, but for what I've looked at, very often it's, people say, we are civilized because we have drink. You know,
No, I don't agree with that statement.
Well, you might not, but this is what they often say, you know, when people define themselves.
Well, that's part of this. We invented everything. The Europeans. When you in the field I'm in, where you're dealing with scientific exchanges and stuff like that, to admit that for example, I gave a paper at a conference on the Huihui Yafeng, and I had all these Galen recipes. He's named by name, Ibn Sina's name, Paul of Aegina's name, all these Greek doctors. She said, "Oh, it can't possibly be Galen." Sure, it is. Well, it certainly is. You can trace it all the way across Central Asia. It's in the Arabic text. And you understand there's more Galen in Arabic and Syriac than there is in Latin and Greek. Far more Galen.
I didn't mean we, us, like here. I meant different cultures.
Every
different
culture does
over.
that.
Exactly. That was the
The Mongols thought if they gave you a gift of the booty, Sauda, they were helping you. And I had problems with, just a second, I had problems with my Korean co-worker, Park Hyun-hee, and I were writing a book because I went and gave a lecture in Seoul, and the Koreans just didn't like what they heard. That basically the Koreans were willing accomplices of the Mongols during the 13th and 14th century. They were conquered by the Mongols, and the Mongols took a requisite number of ladies. They liked the Korean girls. They would carry them off and remarry them. And one of these Korean girls, Empress Gi, ended up as the ruler of Mongol China at the end. I mean, she was the most powerful woman in the world. And so it wasn't all one-sided. And the Korean elite would even speak Mongolian among themselves. So I said all these things, and I said it's a son-in-law culture. It is intermarrying with the ruling house. But there wasn't a lot of discrimination involved. They didn't look down on the Koreans. In fact, if anything, the Koreans were running the Mongols, particularly towards the end. But the Koreans didn't want to hear this. So the book ended up getting killed. Yes.
First Sammy and then come back.
Yes, the word Arab,
Arak.
Iraqi, whatever,
Araji.
seems to have been at one point, I don't know, around about 16th century or thereabout, seemed to be all distilled spirit
Yeah.
all over the world was called one form or another of Arab.
It is the Arabic
You
word.
get it in India, and from India into the British Navy. They also have Arab in Southeast Asia, the Chinese in Indonesia and Malaysia. Whenever they produced distilled liquor, and it was, of course, very different distilled liquors, because it were from all kinds of different materials. And of course, the word is Arabic. I don't know, were you saying it's Mongolian or?
No. Arak is definitely an Arabic word.
I mean,
And
it means perspiration.
the Mongols borrowed the word.
So it's the process of distilling is like perspiration.
Yeah.
Perspiration.
Yeah.
But you can trace it across Central Asia. And then the type of still, there are those two types of stills. I mean, they have the identical still in central Mexico, western Mexico. And I was wasted. I had to go back.
I'm sorry, but I have a little practical problem. Explain to me why the wooden still doesn't catch fire.
There wasn't what?
Why the wooden still doesn't catch fire. I've never seen a wooden still.
Oh, you can go to a local history museum in Iceland, and there are bootleg stills. I've seen them. The ones we
Well,
looked at.
you've shown pictures of them.
Yeah, now they put them.
Why don't they catch fire?
But why didn't they?
Why don't they catch fire?
Oh,
Right.
they do.
In that case, it's no liquor.
I was told when we were making this, my photographer was snap, and I'm talking to the locals, and half in Mongolian, half in English, and half in God knows what else. And they were saying, oh, you have to be very careful. That's why they do metal. But it said the wooden ones can catch fire and char and things like that. Oh yeah, they do catch fire, and they burn the earth down. So it's a matter of your priorities.
Just a quick question going back to the topic of arak and alcohol. The word, do you know by any chance why the Mongols adopted the word arak to refer to the fermented mare's milk? Because that's the one that stands out to me as not being a distilled alcohol, because it's fermented, but it's still adopted the same name, the same word. Do you know why that is?
I know some Arabic, but the word arak is a real problem. It seems to be Yemenite or something like that. It's a local word. Why do they use this Arabic word to describe this distilled liquor? And there are two reasons that I know about. One is that a lot of the people that were doing the distillation and writing about it and so forth were Muslims. And the other reason is there seems to be a South Seas, Indian Ocean tradition of making arak too, that has nothing to do with the Mongol one, and he uses a different type of still. And perhaps the word was popularized across the Indian Ocean. We don't know. But the Muslim presence in China during this period is enormous. Is enormous. In fact, one writer says that the Jungle voyages were taken to proselytize, spread Islam. Even though the Ming Emperor was a Muslim, Zheng He was, and things like that. So there's so many things we don't know about. But why would they use this Arabic word?
Well, what puzzles me even more than that actually is, so in Mongolia, the word they use for the fermented mare's milk is also arak, which refers this time to a fermented beverage and not a distilled one. So I was wondering.
They drink the fermented mare's milk, arak, and if it's arak, then if it's arak, then it's distilled.
No,
And
arak is also the fermented mare's milk in Mongolia.
I still didn't understand. I don't hear it.
Oh, sorry. In Mongolian, arak also refers to the fermented mare's milk. So, and it's.
Do they use fermented milk?
No, that arak also refers to the fermented mare's milk, as well as the distilled.
Oh, I see what you're saying. No, you shouldn't.
Well, it does.
If a Mongol is referring to this as, they know the difference. And I can ask more about this and try to follow it up, but I've never been there when they referred to, they referred to this as arak. Now there's several layers. There's a first distillation, and sometimes a second distillation, and a third distillation, and the hero is supposed to drink this in one gulp. And then the hero either becomes stronger or he dies, in which case his girlfriend has to go and bring him back, his soul. And if she fails, the horse goes. Because the horse is smartest of all, smarter than the girl. I suspect that the Mongols got in the habit of referring to just straight fermented mare's milk as arak because of the fact that in many cases it has gone through a first distillation. It's just low proof. And so, but this, I will ask a Mongol. I will ask my friend Botlarz to explain this to me. Yes, ma'am.
Is kumis fermented mare's milk?
Kumis is the Turkish, kumiz in Kazakhstan, but kumis is the Turkish word for fermented mare's milk.
Yeah.
And then shubat is the word for,
And what's ayran then?
that's just the Mongol word.
That's the Mongol one.
That's the
so
Mongol.
why do they keep calling it that?
Because kumis is William of Rubric
Yeah.
in the 1200s is already calling it kumis.
Yes.
And so the Turkic word was so widespread, it was hard to fight against it. And I guess but the Mongols certainly know what they're making.
Yeah.
In Kyrgyzstan, they have both words, but they mean totally different things.
So Sherry's talking.
Oh, I was saying, in Kyrgyzstan they have kumis and they have ayran, but they're two totally different things. The kumis is the fermented mare's milk, and ayran is basically yogurt.
Iran is something entirely different than it. It's not.
I always get
alcohol.
oh, I know what you're talking about. Iraq. That's another word.
Iran, well,
Yeah.
Iran is
That's the
is
stronger one,
buttermilk or dilute.
Well, it's the
yogurt.
raw material after you fermented cow's milk or horse's milk. There is a study of all the terms for fermented milks in Mongolian.
Yeah.
It is in Mongolian.
But
So.
it's fermented, but it is not alcohol fermented.
No.
It's fermented
Well-
milk in the sense of, yogurt. It's fermented.
Kumis.
Huh?
That's quite alcoholic, isn't it? Kumis.
I prefer to use the word kumis because it's no question about what you're dealing with. And the Mongol terms are ambiguous. I guess that's what you were saying. The Mongol terms are ambiguous. I need to, when I write this up, I need to put all the terminology in. And,
Going back to your green vegetable that they ate with kumis, I think they mean dandana, which is a kind of Chinese chive. And in Iran they call it tare, or something like tare.
I believe that's what I was told. It
Yeah.
wasn't a green onion. And
No, it's like a Chinese chive. It's got a sort of garlicky bulb at the end, and it's a long, dark green sort of thing. And they chop it up and they.
and why they called it green onions.
Because it has got an oniony flavour.
Yeah, I don't, my Mongol informant was very livid about that. No, it's not green onion. And so I think you're correct, yeah. So, and I meant to ask her again, I wanted a species and things like that, but.
You can buy it in London if you've got the time. If you go to
Oh,
a little
really?
commercial shop, they sell it.
Now, if we could just buy hummus and we were in, I mean, everywhere we went, we were invited to have hummus. And one place we were invited to have shubat, which is the camel, that's the Turkic word too, for camel hummus. And it really is a great cultural food. When they have it, you're expected to drink it as part of the ritual, and little kids drink it, and you're presented with both hands, like in many cultures, the way you present alcohol to people. I think in Japan they do that too. Don't you, when you give somebody to drink something, yeah, I don't think they got that from the Mongols. I think it's just a universal. But there's you have to go through this ritual of presenting the booze. And if the head of the house is giving you, like he handed it to me and I had to pick it up, and like it was Korean, I had to bow. And
Symbolically, if you hand something with both hands, you cannot be holding a weapon.
I was just going to say that, yes.
This is-
Really originally,
this
that's
is
how
this-
it came about.
this is why next trip to Mongolia, I'm taking, in addition to my photographer, I'm taking a little daughter who's 10, and it's the Sacagawea principle. Sacagawea went with Lewis and Clark, and she had a baby. And the Indians that encountered them knew it wasn't a war party. So I said, in case the Mongols decide to run amok, we'll have this 11, it should be 11-year-old. And she saved us because we had, in the book, we had a picture of, quote, a yak. And she looked at it and says, that's not a yak, it's a hybrid yak. And she said, you've been studying them in school. And I checked, and she was right. And I said, we're going to have to mention you in the foreword. And she said, in Spanish, about my full Spanish name. And I said, okay, it's a deal. But she was very helpful. And, but I think that why take a child to Mongolia? It's safe. And I just think that it would be such a when she grows up, it'll be such an experience. And it also simplifies the babysitting problem.
Okay.
But she brought her to Seattle, and that's when she talked about the yak and so forth.
Any other questions? Mike? No. Okay, just let me, this is, did I understand you correctly, that the Mongols were actually the main disseminator of...
Yeah, they didn't invent anything.
They didn't invent it, but through their enthusiasm, their dominance, and their putting groups together, they were actually responsible for spreading this particular...
It wasn't that, I mean, distillation was around. The Chinese probably had sorghum land even before them. But what the Mongols did is they spread a portable, easy-to-use technology.
And were enthusiastic in their use to it and spread that.
They also spread tea.
Tea, yes.
I mean, tea in most parts of the world was really only came in with the British in the 19th century. But there's evidence that tea came to Iran much earlier
Even seen.
through the Mongols bringing it from China.
Did you know that the Mongol tea is milk tea, and it's really quite good. You take a brick of tea and you boil it forever, and it gets really strong, and you have milk, and then you drink this, and it zaps you out. But that type of tea, they didn't start drinking that until the end of the 13th century. So about the time, no sooner did they get, tea had already was known as a medicinal, they had been seen it. But about the time the Mongols create the empire, suddenly tea drinking arrives, and all over the place. So they spread tea drinking too. And all the things, I won't live long enough to write all this stuff down, but because there's so much, and I've single-handedly dug all this stuff up. And but you have to pay attention to words, you have to pay attention to practices, and Persian sources are particularly good in terms of having details. And we also have tomb pictures where they're all sitting around feasting after the person is deceased, and they're just still sitting on the table. I didn't even talk about that because my colleague Angela Scheltenhammer is going to publish that. So.
You brought to mind just one little question. What is that sorghum? Is that sorghum piccolo? I thought that was sort of more African.
It is from Africa. It is from Africa. It got across the Bab el Mandeb, is that the name of that strait? And by Rashid al-Din's time, it had hit Iran. And Kublai Khan picked it up because it's starting to dry up a little bit. The climate was changing. And sorghum is adapted to drier conditions. And I mean, we don't have to make this up. Rashid al-Din says Kublai Khan wanted sorghum because it allowed him to farm in areas that were dry, or he could encourage farming in areas that were dry. And so sorghum spreads. Needham says, Huang actually, in the Science of Civilization series, says that distilling sorghum to make a liquor starts in the 9th century, starts right at the end of Tang. I don't know about that, but the important thing is that's one of the things, the small coarse grain liquor that they refer to in the Yuzhan Zhongmiao is almost certainly sorghum brandy. So there's many sources of all this thing that's going on. But the important thing is that Kublai Khan had enough sense to say, oh, this is going to work really well in dry areas in North China and southern Mongolia, and pushed it. And then Rashid al-Din, who was usually well informed about what was going on in China, says, oh yeah, Kublai Khan was pushing this. It's Annette Lampton, who I think she must be dead by now, she'd be 120. But she wrote a paper in 1991 on this agricultural manual of Rashid al-Din. And there's all kinds of stuff about China. One of the things we're going to study in our Silk Road project is the transmission of crops. I mean, even grapes, wheat. I mean, it's all across Central Asia. The transmission of crops and irrigation technology The system where you go into the mountain and you collect water and it all runs out, that travels to China. And it's all over Kazakhstan still. And there are these accounts of what went on and so forth. And nobody's really used Rashid al-Din's accounts of China. There's not enough time. This is a 5-year project. And I make a point, it's one of my firm principles that Valerie will appreciate, to always try to collaborate with younger people. This young Kazakh girl I'm working with is 27. She's going to be around for a while. My photographer is 49. She just turned 49. She's going to be around for a while. And so on and so on. Almost every person that I collaborate with, except for Jean Anderson, who's older than me, the lady, I'm writing a book, Historical Dictionary of the Mongol Empire. It's a second edition. And I'm working with, I don't know how old she is. I never asked her. I don't care. And, but she's got to be in her 30s. So if I drop dead, she can finish the book. She's a Mongols too. And so I think that sitting on a rocky pedestal and looking at the world and feeling superior doesn't work. I have to pass on what I know. And I do this by working with younger people. This Kazakh girl in particular is a real protege. And she works on genealogy. That's genealogy and cultural transformation and political emergence of the Kazakhs and so forth. And so I took all the Mongolian stuff I have and just said, here, it's yours, work with it. And the Kazakhs, because I go to Alma-Ata, I talk to their food historians, I talk to their museum people. Did you know that the samovar technology is probably connected with distillation? And things you don't. When I went to Kazakhstan, I was taken in a room. It was all full of samovars. And I said, "What are you doing? You're going to get tea?" And he said, "No, it's connected with distillation." He was the head of the Kazakhstan Central Museum. And I thought, wow, I didn't even think about
Well, now the next thing on the agenda is drink. I mean,
yes, I'm not going to go home. Let's go find a place to have
Fermented bear's milk.
Yes,